He only wanted a fake girlfriend to protect his image, but falling for his maid was never part of the plan. In a world where appearances meant everything, one reckless proposal would blur the line between business and desire and uncover a love neither of them expected. The ballroom shimmered with golden chandeliers and the musical clink of champagne glasses. Waiters in crisp white uniforms glided between powerful men in tailored suits and elegant women draped in designer gowns that cost more than most people earned in a year. Crystal glasses caught the light like tiny prisms, scattering rainbows across marble floors polished to mirror perfection. But at the far end of the grand hall stood a man who, despite all the wealth and attention surrounding him, looked like he carried the weight of the world on his broad shoulders. His name was Ethan Carter, a 35-year-old self-made millionaire who had built one of the most prestigious real estate empires in New York from the ground up. On paper, he had everything success could offer. Influence that opened doors with a single phone call, a reputation that made competitors nervous, and wealth that could buy almost anything except what he truly needed. Tonight, however, none of that mattered. Because tonight, surrounded by Manhattan's elite, he was painfully reminded of the whispers that followed him everywhere. His status as a single father. His 6-year-old daughter Lily was back at the mansion in the care of their housekeeper while he attended this gala. His mother and board members had pressured him to attend. "You need to remarry, Ethan," they had said repeatedly, their voices blending into a chorus of expectations. "Lily needs a mother figure. The company needs a stable family image. Investors want to see commitment, stability." Their words felt less like advice and more like chains tightening around his chest with each repetition. Ethan's sharp jawline and cold gray eyes could silence an entire boardroom with a single glance. But here, surrounded by superficial laughter and calculated compliments, he felt strangely exposed and vulnerable in ways that business negotiations never made him feel. He caught sight of couples holding hands with practiced ease, women leaning into their husbands' shoulders with elegant grace, and his throat tightened with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. Loneliness. The kind that expensive wine and business success could never quite wash away. Meanwhile, across the city in a modest brownstone apartment that smelled of lavender and old books, Claire Bennett folded laundry with practiced efficiency while keeping an ear out for Lily's bright giggles echoing from the living room. At 28, Claire embodied warmth itself. Her gentle brown eyes reflected kindness earned through hardship, and her smile could light up the darkest room. She had known struggles that money could never soften or erase. Her mother lay in a hospital bed fighting illness, and medical bills piled up faster than Claire could count them. Every dollar mattered. Every shift worked was another small step toward keeping her mother alive. Yet despite her own heavy burdens, she poured endless kindness into caring for Lily as if the bright-eyed child were her own flesh and blood. Lily adored her completely. The little girl clung to Claire's hand at bedtime, begged for her stories about magical kingdoms and brave princesses, and often whispered the innocent question that twisted Claire's heart each time. "Why don't you stay with us forever?" Back at the gala, Ethan's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He pulled it out to find a photo message from Claire. Lily, in her favorite pink pajamas covered in stars, hugging her beloved stuffed bunny, grinning wide as if to say, "I'm okay, Daddy. Don't worry about me." A rare, genuine smile tugged at Ethan's usually stern lips. In that captured moment of pure childhood joy, he realized something profound. Claire's presence in his daughter's life was more precious than any business deal he had ever closed, more valuable than the millions in his various accounts. But the smile faded quickly when his mother appeared at his elbow, her diamond necklace catching the chandelier light and throwing sparkles across her perfectly made-up face. "Ethan," she said firmly, her tone brooking no argument, "the press is watching you constantly. You cannot keep showing up alone to these events. It reflects poorly on the company. You need to introduce someone significant by your side." His board members had echoed the same sentiment that very morning in his corner office. "Family image is everything in this business," one had insisted while adjusting his expensive tie. "Your competitors will weaponize your single status. Investors want stability, not uncertainty." That was when the idea struck him like lightning. Reckless, desperate, yet strangely inevitable. Ethan thought of Claire, the woman who already played such an important role in Lily's world, who brought genuine warmth to his cold mansion, who never asked for anything beyond her modest salary. She was not a socialite dripping in designer labels. She was not a model whose face graced magazine covers. She was just real, honest, caring, and perhaps that authenticity was exactly what he needed. The more he considered it, the more sense it made in a twisted, complicated way. The following evening, Ethan returned home late from another endless round of meetings. The mansion was quiet, most lights had already dimmed. Claire was still awake in the kitchen, quietly mending one of Lily's dresses by hand at the wooden table. The lamp's warm glow fell across her face, softening her tired eyes and highlighting the concentration in her expression as her needle moved with careful precision. Ethan hesitated in the doorway, watching her for a moment. She looked so at peace, so genuinely content with this simple task. How could he ask what he was about to ask? Yet he had no other option. Finally, he cleared his throat, the sound seeming too loud in the peaceful quiet. "Claire," he said, his voice lower and more uncertain than usual. She looked up, clearly surprised to see him home and even more surprised by the tension radiating from his normally controlled demeanor. "Yes, Mr. Carter? Is something wrong? Is Lily okay?" "Lily's fine. I need to ask you for something." He paused, struggling with words that felt heavy on his tongue. "Something unusual. Something important." She carefully set down the dress and gave him her complete attention, her hands folding neatly in her lap. "Of course, Mr. Carter. What is it?" Ethan inhaled deeply, as if preparing to dive into cold water. The words came out in a rush. "I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend." The silence that followed was deafening. Claire blinked rapidly, certain she had misheard. Her hands froze and she whispered, "Excuse me? What did you just say?" Ethan's eyes did not waver, though she could see the muscle in his jaw tighten. "I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who already cares deeply for Lily. Someone genuine in a world of pretense. And I cannot think of anyone better than you." Her heart pounded in disbelief, each beat echoing in her ears. She was just the maid, the help, someone who cleaned toilets and folded laundry. How could she possibly step into the role of a millionaire's girlfriend? The very idea seemed absurd, like something from a movie rather than real life. And yet, she could see in his eyes that he was deadly serious. This was no joke, no test. He genuinely wanted this from her. "Mr. Carter, that's impossible," she finally managed, shaking her head slowly. "I'm your employee. I clean your home. I watch over Lily. How could I possibly pretend to be your girlfriend? People would see through it immediately." Ethan's jaw tightened, his usually commanding tone softening into something rare, almost pleading. "Claire, listen to me carefully. I know how this sounds. I know it seems crazy, but I cannot think of anyone else I trust enough for this. This isn't about glamour or appearances for their own sake. This is about protecting Lily from constant questions about why she doesn't have a mother. This is about protecting the company from vultures who see my single status as a weakness." Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, needing something solid to anchor herself. "Why me? You could have anyone. Someone elegant, someone educated, someone from your world who knows how to navigate society." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to something almost intimate. "Because you are already part of Lily's world. She feels completely safe with you. You're not pretending when you care for her. You genuinely love my daughter. That authenticity is exactly why I need you. Everyone else would be acting. You would just be yourself." The words struck her harder than she expected. For a brief, vulnerable moment, Claire saw not the intimidating millionaire everyone envied and feared, but a father desperately trying to shield his daughter from a cruel world that judged and whispered. A man trapped by expectations he never asked for. Still, the thought of stepping into the spotlight terrified her to her core. She tried to laugh it off, though it came out shaky and uncertain. "You think people will believe that someone like me could suddenly be your girlfriend? They'll laugh at me. They'll call me a gold digger, an opportunist, someone taking advantage." Ethan's gaze hardened with determination. "Let them laugh. I will handle the press, the gossip, all of it. What I need from you is simply honesty. The same honesty you show Lily every single day. That genuine care. The rest, all the superficial nonsense, I can manage." Claire looked away, her mind spinning in circles. She thought of her mother lying in that sterile hospital bed, tubes and monitors tracking every weak heartbeat, bills piling higher than she could ever hope to repay on her modest salary. She thought of Lily, that sweet little girl's eyes shining with trust whenever Claire tucked her in at night. And she thought of herself, always invisible, always on the edges of the life she could never truly have, watching others live the dreams she had abandoned long ago. Of course, there would be compensation, Ethan added carefully, sensing her hesitation and the calculations happening behind her eyes. "Generous compensation. I will cover all your mother's hospital bills, every single one. I will make sure you never worry about money again. But Claire, understand this clearly. This is not charity. This is a business arrangement, a contract. You would be helping me as much as I would be helping you." Her breath caught painfully in her chest. It sounded so transactional, so cold when stated that way. Yet there was genuine sincerity in his voice that made her chest ache with something she could not quite name. She realized he was not trying to insult her dignity or buy her like property. He was offering her a chance, however strange and complicated, to step into a role that could change everything for both of them. "And Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happens to her when she realizes it's all fake? When this arrangement ends?" Ethan paused, guilt flickering visibly in his eyes for the first time. "I will do everything in my power to protect her from that truth. But maybe..." He hesitated, as if the words were difficult to form. "Maybe it doesn't have to feel fake. Maybe it just has to feel like family, even if only for a little while." Claire's heart squeezed painfully. She had promised herself never to get too attached to the family she worked for, never to dream of belonging where she did not. Yet she already loved Lily like her own daughter, and the thought of giving that precious child the illusion of a complete family felt almost unbearable to refuse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded slowly. Her voice trembled but held firm. "I'll do it. But only for Lily's sake. Only to give her that happiness." Ethan exhaled deeply, relief washing over his usually stoic face like a wave. For the first time that evening, the unshakable Seo looked almost vulnerable, almost human. "Thank you, Claire. I promise you won't regret this decision." Little did either of them know that this single conversation would set in motion events that would transform both their lives in ways neither could possibly imagine. The next days passed in a whirlwind that left Claire feeling dizzy and disconnected from reality. Ethan's assistant, a sharply dressed woman named Patricia, arrived at the mansion with boxes upon boxes. Designer dresses in fabrics Claire had never dared to touch, shoes with red soles she had only seen in magazines, and jewelry that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Claire stood before the full-length mirror in her small room, barely recognizing her own reflection. A floor-length emerald gown hugged her figure perfectly, the fabric shimmering like water under light. The woman staring back at her looked elegant, poised, and confident. But inside, Claire felt exactly the same. An ordinary woman from a working-class background, terrified of playing an extraordinary role. "You look beautiful," Patricia said approvingly, circling Claire like a sculptor examining her work. "Mr. Carter has excellent taste." But Claire's hands shook as she touched the delicate beading on the dress. "I don't know if I can do this. What if I say something wrong? What if I embarrass him?" Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Just be yourself. That's what he asked for, isn't it? Your authenticity." At the mansion, etiquette lessons began in earnest. How to hold a wine glass by the stem, never the bowl. How to nod politely at investors without seeming too eager or too dismissive. How to smile warmly without speaking too much or appearing too opinionated. The rules seemed endless, suffocating. Ethan supervised some of these lessons personally. During one practice dinner, he corrected her posture, his hand briefly touching her back to adjust her position. The contact sent a confusing shiver through Claire that she tried desperately to ignore. This was business, she reminded herself. Just business. Nothing more. Each practice dinner ended with Lily's delighted laughter as the little girl clapped her hands enthusiastically. "You look like a real princess, Claire. Just like in my storybooks." Still, doubt gnawed at Claire's confidence constantly. Every time she walked through the mansion in her borrowed designer gowns, she remembered the smell of industrial laundry soap still clinging to her roughened hands. The simple, honest life she had always known felt like a different universe. Could she really stand beside Ethan in front of cameras and a judgmental society without completely falling apart? The first real test came faster than anyone expected. An exclusive charity banquet was announced for the following weekend, swarming with reporters hungry for stories and high society figures eager to dissect Ethan's every move. His mother called with barely concealed excitement mixed with warning. "Bring her, Ethan," his mother commanded over the phone. "If you're serious about this woman, it's time to prove it publicly. No more hiding." On the evening of the event, Claire stepped out of the sleek black car on Ethan's offered arm. Camera flashes exploded like lightning all around them, momentarily blinding. The crowd of reporters and onlookers gasped audibly, murmurs rippling through the gathered masses like wind through wheat. "Who is she?" voices called out. "Where did she come from?" others demanded. "Is that really Ethan Carter's girlfriend?" Ethan leaned down, his lips near Claire's ear as his warm breath sent shivers down her spine. He whispered firmly, "Ignore them completely. You're with me. That's all that matters. Hold your head up." Claire forced herself to smile despite every instinct screaming at her to run, to hide, to return to the safe invisibility of her old life. Her heart raced so fast she thought it might burst through her chest. But then Lily's trusting face flashed in her memory, those bright eyes shining with innocent faith. She lifted her chin, took a steady breath, and walked into the storm of flashbulbs and whispers beside him. That night marked the beginning of a game neither could afford to lose. A game where the stakes were higher than either had imagined. The charity banquet was supposed to be just another staged performance, another checkbox on the list of public appearances. Claire had told herself to simply smile politely, nod at the right moments, and let Ethan do most of the talking. Yet as the evening unfolded in the gilded ballroom, she realized that no amount of rehearsal could have prepared her for the subtle cruelty that defined high society. Eyes followed her every movement with laser focus. Some gazes held genuine curiosity, others burned with barely concealed disdain. Whispers floated across the room like poison carried on perfumed air. "She's absolutely nobody. Where did he possibly find her? I heard she was his maid. Can you imagine? A maid playing dress up. Gold digger written all over her. How transparent." Each whispered word sliced deeper than the glare of camera flashes. At the dinner table, surrounded by Manhattan's wealthiest and most influential, Claire felt microscopic despite her elegant gown. A woman dripping in diamonds leaned forward, her manicured hand resting under her chin as she studied Claire like a fascinating insect. "So, Claire," the woman said sweetly, her voice dripping with poisonous honey, "tell us all how you and Ethan met. I imagine it must have been quite unusual given your different backgrounds." Claire froze completely, her throat going completely dry. She had practiced answers to common questions, but under the piercing collective gaze of the entire table, her mind went utterly blank. Panic began rising in her chest. Ethan's hand found hers under the pristine white tablecloth, squeezing gently but firmly. His voice cut through her panic, calm and commanding. "We met through Lily," he said smoothly, as if discussing something completely ordinary. "Claire has been the kindest, most genuine influence in my daughter's life. I honestly cannot imagine anyone more authentic or caring." Soft gasps echoed around the table. The diamond-draped woman pressed her lips into a thin, disapproving line before turning away with a dismissive sniff. But Ethan's words stayed with Claire long after the awkward dinner finally ended, warming her from the inside. Genuine. Authentic. He had defended her honor not with elaborate lies, but with simple truth about her character. Later that night, back at the mansion's quiet sanctuary, Claire slipped gratefully out of her restrictive gown and into comfortable pajamas that felt like coming home. She sat in the familiar kitchen, sipping chamomile tea, when Ethan entered, still in his dress shirt but with his tie loosened and top buttons undone. The tension of the evening seemed to hang between them like morning fog. "You did remarkably well tonight," he said simply, pouring himself water from the filtered pitcher. Claire laughed softly, but it came out hollow and sad. "I nearly fainted at that table. I don't belong in that world, Ethan. I never will." Ethan studied her quietly, his gray eyes thoughtful. "You belonged more than anyone else in that entire room. Don't let their small minds make you forget your worth." His words startled her. She desperately wanted to believe him, but the fear of inadequacy still lingered in her chest like a persistent shadow. Days turned into weeks, and gradually the arrangement continued evolving. What surprised both of them most was how natural it began to feel. Claire was no longer just playing the part of Ethan's girlfriend at carefully choreographed public events. She was becoming woven into the fabric of their daily lives in ways neither had anticipated. Mornings began with shared breakfasts at the sunny kitchen table, Lily giggling between them as she told elaborate stories about her stuffed animals' adventures, insisting that Claire and Ethan sit side by side. Evenings ended with Claire reading bedtime stories in her gentle voice while Ethan leaned against the doorframe of Lily's bedroom, watching silently, his usually stern features softening in the warm lamplight. One Saturday afternoon, they visited Central Park together as a family. Lily ran ahead with boundless energy, chasing pigeons and squealing with delight, her laughter echoing against the autumn air crisp with the promise of coming winter. Claire knelt down on the path, patiently helping Lily tie her sparkly shoelaces while Ethan stood a few feet away. Something tugged at Ethan's heart as he watched them together. The way Claire's face glowed with genuine affection. The way Lily looked at her was with complete trust and love. For the first time in the 3 years since his wife's death, he felt something dangerous stir inside him. Something that felt remarkably close to peace, to wholeness, to the family he thought he had lost forever. On the walk back, unexpected rain began falling in fat, cold drops. They rushed laughing under a wooden gazebo, droplets dancing all around them like liquid diamonds. Claire brushed wet strands of dark hair from her face, laughing breathlessly, her cheeks flushed pink from the cold and exertion. Ethan watched her, utterly captivated by how alive and unburdened she looked in that unguarded moment. Their eyes met and held for a single, electric heartbeat. The world fell completely silent except for the rhythmic patter of rain on the gazebo roof. Claire looked away first, her cheeks flushing deeper. "We should get Lily home before she catches a cold." Ethan nodded slowly, but inside he knew with absolute certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them. The careful boundaries of their arrangement were beginning to blur in ways that both thrilled and terrified him. As weeks melted into months, the line between performance and reality blurred until it became almost invisible. Claire still told herself firmly that this was merely a contract, a business arrangement that would end eventually. But when Ethan's hand accidentally brushed hers while reaching for coffee, when his unexpected laughter rang out at something silly she said, when his eyes lingered on her face longer than strictly necessary, she felt a dangerous truth taking root in her heart like spring flowers pushing through frozen ground. And deep in places he refused to examine too closely, Ethan knew it too. What had begun as a calculated arrangement to satisfy societal expectations was slowly, inevitably becoming something neither of them could control or deny. One evening, Ethan hosted an important dinner at the mansion for several key investors whose support could make or break his next major development project. Claire stood at his side, wearing a simple but elegant navy gown chosen by Patricia. She smiled politely, spoke little, and tried to fade into the background. Yet whispers still reached her ears with cruel clarity. "She was definitely his maid," a man muttered behind his crystal whiskey glass. "I heard it from someone who knows someone." "Clearly she's only after his money," a woman in head-to-toe Chanel hissed to her companion, her jeweled fingers tapping impatiently against her clutch. How utterly transparent and pathetic. Claire forced her practiced smile to remain steady despite the way her chest burned with humiliation. She excused herself as gracefully as possible, stepping out onto the moonlit balcony for desperately needed air. The night was beautifully cool, city lights shimmering in the distance like fallen stars, but her eyes stung with tears she absolutely refused to shed in front of anyone. Ethan followed moments later, concern etched across his usually controlled features. "What happened? Claire, talk to me." She shook her head, clutching the cold marble railing until her knuckles turned white. "They're right about everything. I don't belong in this world. Every single time I walk into a room full of your people, I feel like a complete fraud playing dress-up in someone else's life." Ethan's voice sharpened with protective anger. "Don't say that. You belong here more than they ever will. You have something they cannot buy with all their money. True decency. Real honesty." Claire turned to face him, her voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. "Then why does it hurt so much when they look at me like I'm dirt beneath their expensive shoes? You don't understand what it's like, Ethan. I hear it in every whispered word. Gold digger. Imposter. Nobody. I'm not strong enough for this." For the first time since she had known him, his iron control faltered visibly. His jaw tightened, and his words came out harsher than he intended, sharp with frustration. "If you cannot handle the pressure of this life, then maybe this entire arrangement was a terrible mistake from the beginning." The silence that followed cut deeper than any insult from the judgmental crowd inside. Claire's eyes filled with unshed tears that finally spilt over. She whispered in a voice barely audible, "Thank you for reminding me exactly what I am to you. Just a mistake." She walked back inside before he could find words to take back what he had said, before he could explain that his anger came from helplessness rather than truth. The rest of the evening passed in agonizing slowness. Claire kept her careful distance, speaking only when absolutely necessary, her smile as brittle and fragile as spun glass. That night, after the last guests had finally departed, Claire retreated to her small room in the mansion's staff wing. She pulled out her worn suitcase and began packing with trembling hands. Every designer dress, every piece of borrowed jewelry, suddenly felt like chains rather than gifts. She folded her simple maid's uniform and placed it carefully on the bed, then whispered to herself, "I should have known better than to dream." Meanwhile, Ethan stood alone in his study, staring blindly at the dying fire. His mother's voice echoed mockingly in his memory. "You need someone who can handle this world, someone strong enough for public scrutiny." For the first time, he questioned whether he had been fundamentally selfish from the very beginning. Had he dragged Claire into a world that would only tear her apart? Was his need for appearances worth destroying someone genuinely good and kind? The next morning, everything changed. Lily ran through the halls looking for Claire as she did every morning. When she found Claire's door standing open and the room half empty, her little face crumpled in confusion and hurt. "Daddy," she cried, clutching her stuffed bunny tightly. "Where is Claire? Why are her things gone?" Ethan froze, his chest tightening painfully. The sight of his daughter's tears pierced him deeper than any boardroom defeat ever could. He realized with devastating clarity that this was no longer just about public image or business strategy. Claire had become family, whether he had been brave enough to admit it or not. And if he let her walk away now without fighting for her, he would lose far more than a convenient arrangement. He would lose the very heart of his home, the light that had returned to Lily's eyes, and perhaps the only chance at real love he might ever have again. What did you think of Claire and Ethan's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming romance stories.